We're back for the final part of our conversation of NASCAR. We're here in the Hall of Fame in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've discussed a lot of things. We're going to continue the discussion here. And on the panel, we have William Byron, driver from Hendrick Motorsports. Next to William, we have John Probst, NASCAR Senior Vice President, Chief Racing Development Officer. Next to John, we have Travis Geisler representing the teams. He works at Team Penske, the NASCAR Competition Director. Next to Travis, we have Elton Sawyer, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition, and to my left, Christopher Bell, driver from Joe Gibbs Racing. All right, so we start with the schedule because it dictates kind of everywhere we end up. One thing that we've had on the schedule forever, and I think they were always circled, they were the highlights, right? The Martinsvilles, the Bristols, the Richmonds. If you were gonna build a highlight package, you went with short track racing. It's an area currently that I think the fan base is a little underwhelmed. The sound from the fan base is they don't believe short track racing was as entertaining as it, quote, once was. What or could be done to the short track racing?
Man, I don't know. Like, I remember going to Phoenix for the short track test, and I would have put my heart and soul that that little spoiler was gonna make it better. And as it turns out, it really didn't.
So hold on, I'm gonna make sure to put that in context because we've had a change. In 2023, the short track package has way less downforce than what we had last year, fair?
Fair, yeah.
And with that less downforce, it acts like it has a little more motor because it has less drag, you know, accelerating out of the corner. So you took part of the test and you were all in.
I was all in. At that test in January, whenever we back-to-back it, I swore to you I could get closer to the guy in front of me, and I thought it was gonna be better.
You run a lot of short tracks, you run late models, you run all kinds of stuff. From inside, behind the wheel, do you agree with what the fans are seeing?
I mean, I do. I think the car makes quite a bit of grip by yourself, you know, on a Martinsville, let's say. Like, you're braking pretty deep, you're, you know, hitting the center of the corner, downshifting, accelerating back out. And I feel like when I go run a super late model, like, the big difference between the Cup car and that car is, like, just when you get a headlight out underneath them, like, you can get there and you can kind of pack air. And I feel like that's what makes those races good, is guys are chasing other guys' left rears. Like, you're not trying to hit them, but you're trying to get under them and get close. And, you know, that's what creates that turn underneath and pass them. With this car, like, it's different. Like, the way you pass is different than that. So I think that's what lends itself to having tough times at short tracks, is kind of that not being able to get that little bit of headlight air underneath somebody and get it and make a pass.
So Travis, you're responsible for trying to make them faster than the competition. What areas, like, to the fan who's listening, how do you say, hey, we're gonna go beat William Byron or Christopher Bell? Like, what are you trying to do? Rear grip, front grip, you know, like, what knobs are you trying to turn to be better when you go to the short tracks?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a difficult question the way we race now. I think I totally agree the days of being able to kind of get up and left rear loose somebody, pack air, is what Ryan and Joey talk about all the time. They wish they could do. Like, if I could just make them loose and wiggle them up, I could get underneath them. So, you know, now it's, when you're shifting nearly 1,000 times at Martinsville, you've got brakes that really never wear out. You know, that was a huge area of development in the past, was, you know, how do we brake like the Hendrick cars at Martinsville whenever you guys were dominating every race there, and get the cars to sit flat? You know, you don't work on that anymore because it's there. The parts are kind of dictated to us. There's no disparity in that package. We don't have the same complaints we used to have there. We're not as loose in as we used to be. Martinsville, man, you built loose in, you just kept getting worse, and somebody would start pushing you, you start sliding your rears down into the corner, you get them hot. Now they don't come off the corner, so now a guy's got to run on you on exit. The car just doesn't do that as much. It's not as hard to set a car up for Martinsville.
So I did a little social media scan on all the ideas that were out here, and I kind of want to go through them all, not because I think one's right or wrong, but because they're being discussed, and I think we have people here that may have an opinion on either side. These are the biggest 5 I saw from the fan base on social media. Tire fall off, braking capability, shifting, aero, and high horsepower, and I starred that one twice because that one seemed to continue to go through. So let's start with the ones I've already heard. Braking. For 75 years, you had drum brakes, right? So let's understand where NASCAR has been in 75 years, right? So, Elton, you drove.
I didn't have drum brakes.
How concerned were you?
I promise you I didn't have drum brakes.
I wasn't gonna say drum brakes, but so in your era, as a former driver, when you started a short track, how much were you thinking take care of my brakes so they would be there when I needed them?
Used to, we'd go there and 500 lap race. You knew you had to manage your equipment. You couldn't go out there and run hard all day. The brakes wouldn't take it. So you would see guys throughout the race that they would be running harder, so they'd get by you, so you'd see passing. We have a really good race car. Every part on it, from the brakes to the gearbox, to the steering, to the tires, all of that is really good. We have great race car drivers driving them with really good race teams building them, so therefore they're running at 10 tenths all day long. Everybody is doing that. So I think, again, you back up 20, 30 years, the car wouldn't allow you to do that. You talk about aero, and I think we're, I don't know, 70 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour mid-corner there. So then you start thinking about, okay, it's mechanical grip, and how can I roll the center, get good forward drive to be able to get here, because we know that's how you pass. Shifting, I think, is it's a crutch to me. If you get in the middle of the corner and you get in trouble, these guys can shift and then they can still accelerate off the corner. Where in the past, you didn't have that ability.
So you had the big nod to shifting. So
Yeah,
you feel like it helps drivers recover, where in the past maybe you could have made a pass?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've been a huge advocate of trying to get rid of it. We have the tire now to do it, right? Like in the old car, you actually had to worry about forward drive a little bit. Now, whether it's the tire or the engine, right? Like you just drive in as hard as you can at Martinsville, 10 tenths for 500 laps, downshift, and you're pretty much on the throttle getting off.
Help me, John, because you're way smarter when it comes to this than me. Shifting and increasing your RPM range, is that not like increasing the torque and the horsepower to the rear tires at the same time? Like if I can go down to the lower gear to a higher RPM, doesn't it act like I also have more horsepower?
In a lot of ways, yes, because it's torque on demand at the throttle, right? If it's just there and I can go back to the throttle if I have to shift to get it, I think going into Martinsville, we're all worried about the shifting. And I will say, like on the front end, when we were putting the car together and designing it, we didn't start by going, hey, let's introduce shifting at all these tracks. As we go, we're learning too, right? And we were joking about this earlier. None of us are sitting on the answer and going, hey, I'm gonna hold this back or whatever. Like we all wanna work together, and frankly, I think our relationship with the drivers is probably better than it's ever been. We are looking in the off season to try to do some testing to take that variable out of the equation. It is a complicated package that you have to get right. It's not just the engine, it's not just the gearbox, it's not just the brakes, it's not just, it's all of it. So we got to figure out what's the right recipe, and we continue to do that. We're not going to stop.
So the one I want everyone to speak to, because like I said, it gets 2 stars, the high horsepower conversation. So go ahead, your hand's up. I like this, jump right in.
Big fan. I was watching a lot of races in 2014, like 2013, 2014 was when I was just getting into a race car, and like they had the 850 horsepower, I think it was, and they had the pretty tall spoiler. Like I thought the racing was awesome at Martinsville, and even like the 07, 08 when the cars had a lot of horsepower. Like I just thought those were the good races to me, because you saw lunges off the corner, and I don't know. Maybe the shifting is doing the same thing, but I feel like if you eliminated the shifting and you had more horsepower on the short tracks, you could have something that would create that spinning the tires but staying in the same gear to do it.
Your opinion on the horsepower?
I think you need to make the cars difficult to set up. So
So that's not a horsepower answer.
Whatever
though. So you think
pieces
you
of
can
the
do it another
puzzle
way?
you think you need to use to make the cars harder to set up, harder to drive, more disparity amongst make cars loose in, loose off. Whatever combination we think we need to come up with to do that, that's the direction we got to try to go. I don't think horsepower is a bad thing. I think it's a challenge to implement, but it's doable. So I think it's probably in the direction of making cars harder to drive and harder to set up, so I'd probably lean that way.
Bell, I want to ask you about this because you're in the playoffs. What is your opinion on changes heading into the playoffs? Or at what point do we have to see like, hey, good or bad, these are the rules we're going to run all year? Like, what do you think is acceptable to ask for changes throughout a year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm the wrong person to ask for that, because for me, if they say we're taking the diffuser off for the championship race, then that's what we're doing. If they want to do a rules change and we're going into whatever race, then I'm fine with it.
To defend the two sitting here, you would go on record to say that probably all 36 wouldn't agree?
I mean, would it matter to you?
I don't know. If I'm having a good year.
Be honest. Hold on now. Be honest now.
If I'm having a good year, and then I'm like, oh, they changed the aero package. I'd be like, oh, dang it.
Is this fair? If you were bad at Richmond and we were changing the package, you would be good with it.
I'd be great with it.
And if you killed everybody at Richmond, you would think that's the worst thing they've ever done.
I think that's just how racers think. I mean, it's like,
sure.
hey, don't mess something good up, right? It's like looking at it objectively. I mean, I think there's enough change that could happen throughout the year to settle on. Like, I feel like we could maybe this year learn from looking at the Phoenix race and being like, hey, I don't know if that's better or not, and maybe the next short track we do something different, but then by like midsummer, maybe like before the final short track, we say, hey, this is what we got.
I think from our side, if you look at, we got 26 races that sets our playoff field, right? And then we're going to go race for a championship with those 16 drivers and those 10 races. If we can say, look, you've earned your way into the playoffs by racing with this car, and we've, some tweaks throughout the season, but once we get into playoffs, if there's a lever to pull that we're going to move the needle from, our racing to be, if it's here, it's going here, and everyone agrees to do that, I think we would. But if we're not sure we're going to move the needle, then I think we set ourselves up to,
Yeah, you have a lot of people jumping through a lot of hoops.
Yeah.
When you think, maybe we helped it, maybe we didn't. But to Elton's point, right, we don't want to flip the world upside down going into those events unless we really know we're onto something there that's going to, move the needle without a doubt.
Well, and I'll close with this, right? This is a NASCAR conversation because we're talking about a vehicle, but every major league that holds sporting events adjusts rules. I think that's a passionate conversation. I think the next one, talking about the new car and some of the safety, is another great conversation to have. Daytona, end of the regular season, we see two severe accidents. Blaney, huge hit into turn 4, and then Ryan Preece with a breathtaking flip down the backstretch. How did those accidents shape or affect your preparation, whether that is, did you ask your teams? Did you look into anything? Or even just your mentality where 6-7 days after Daytona, you had to strap in behind the wheel to do that all over again?
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, I have raced a lot of cars, man. And from the day one of getting in the car at Daytona and Talladega, whether that was in the truck, Xfinity car, Gen 6 car, or the next gen car, those places just, they scare me. Like, because the crashes hurt, and they certainly hurt a lot worse with the new car, but we've been making great strides in that too. And it's just one of those deals where it can happen. And I remember watching Larson flip at Daytona in the Xfinity car. I'm like, wow, like that's a guy I know, but that'll never happen to me. And then my first ever Daytona race, I flipped at the end of it.
Teammates.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were flipping across my nose. I was like, this is our first truck race.
From a race car driver, do you inquire about what happened, what could happen to your area or cockpit? What do you take out of an accident like that?
I mean, I'm glad Christopher said what he said, because I feel the same way going to those places. Like, those tracks, as much as they are physical and the danger, it's a really good test of the courage and the effort that it takes to make those moves, because when you're able to block it out and make decisions based on what's most competitive and not think about that is the nature of being an athlete, I think. And we've made huge strides from last year's safety to now, and we still have new wrecks that happen. Like Ryan Preece's wreck, there were new things in that, like the amount of rotations, how fast the rotations were. Like, to me, that was a little bit alarming, and something that to look at a new situation. But I want us to still study the head injuries, study what the headrest needs to look like. I feel like we could still improve all those things, because the crashes aren't going away, but how we protect ourselves in those environments, I feel like is still improving, and there's a lot of knowledge there.
Well, to your point, the crashes aren't going away. We are always going to have wrecks. That's what happens in racing. So just explain to the fans and even to us, what happens, right? A car's wrecked, you guys take it back. how is it observed? How do we learn? Because we have moved forward. How does that process work?
So, right after those incidents happened, probably while the 17 was celebrating in victory lane, we were out on the backstretch, measuring the skid marks, looking at the dirt, the grass. Obviously, we secure the car. Different tracks have different policies in how we do that. Actually, when you're in Daytona, the local law enforcement actually have custody of the car for a while. But then once the car is released, it does come back to the R&D center. They'll then replicate the crash in CAD. If we see something on the car that we don't particularly like, in this case, there was an issue we saw with the window net, the bottom of the window net. We communicate that out to the race team straight away that, hey, we're no longer want to see this version of the window net. We need to be updated from now on. Sometimes this is where it may seem like we're not doing anything, but they go back and they actually model the crash in a program called Dyna. We replicate what happened. We have all the crash data off the car, video from the driver, all of the inertial measurements on the car. We try different fixes. And then when we think we have a fix in CAD, we'll take it up and crash it as physical vehicles. And you probably saw when you're at the R&D center, there are a lot of next-gen cars sitting around that have been crashed. And I think that, as fans, it's easy to, and even sometimes as industry guys, we get caught up in the entertainment. It really is dangerous what these guys do and the stuff they, put themselves through. And we lose more sleep just worrying about their safety. But, as a fan, you don't always see that.
So it's fascinating because we've talked about a lot of things and they've all circled back together, right? So whether it is venues or schedule or safety or rules packages or whatever, how does it all get discussed? Where do you guys go to voice these opinions?
Yeah, so all 36 full-time guys have a driver chat, and we go on there and talk about various things. And I'm not as opinionated as some, I don't feel like. So I feel like some guys have more concrete things that they want, but for me, it's kind of go with the flow, and I'm still trying to learn kind of what I do like. It's my 6th year, so I feel like I have a better idea of kind of what direction I want to go, but yeah.
6th year, that's showing my age a smidge. Same, kind of the same process for you, or do you do it differently?
Yeah, honestly, the NASCAR guys have done an amazing job here recently of scheduling meetings that they invite all the drivers to and kind of give us updates on where we're at on a lot of technical stuff of how you officiate the races, what the aero package updates are. So, we have that venue, and then, we got the group chat, a lot of porta potty talk on pit road. So between the group chat and then our meetings, that's our communication.
I know the group chat on our side, so they have a group chat that we're on as well. And there's nothing more fun than when you land and you look and you got 90 new, you're like, oh no. You never know what it is. They could be arguing with each other, but
Oh, there's always something. Yeah. There's always something about caution lights or.
Yeah. I think to that point, today's NASCAR, if you will, the collaboration between the drivers and the teams and the OEMs and our broadcast partners is probably better than we've ever had.
I think Elton hit it, right? We have councils upon councils. Even beyond that, it's relationships and open communication that we keep. But that doesn't mean we always do exactly what everybody says. You can't. To your point earlier, we have so many stakeholders in this sport, from the fans to the broadcasters, that you will never make everyone happy. Some joke, right? If we have everybody about the same amount angry at us, we're probably doing our job. But yeah, it really is relationships.
Yeah, I think this forum is an example of that. This is really kind of a place that's a bit unheard of, I think. We haven't typically sat down and just had a conversation with drivers and NASCAR and teams and just said, here's all the challenges. Let's try to figure out how we fix some of the fans' problems, because that's the most important thing for all of us, right? I think being able to talk openly and, maybe admit that you don't know, because that's probably the first most important thing to a lot of these problems is if there was a known answer, it'd be more civil engineering where this bridge has to hold 2 trucks. This is a whole lot more of chemistry and engineering and just chaos theory all thrown together, and it takes somebody from every walk of life kind of putting their 2 cents in, and these guys get the unenviable task of trying to sort it all out and put something together that makes sense.
Well, you just gave me the jumping off point for our next roundtable. We're not going to get to it here, but I think we'll start off with what makes a great race. And I'll let you guys debate on what exactly
good story on that.
A great race is.
When I first got to NASCAR, we took all the data we had and threw it to a company and said, hey, a bunch of PhDs in data analytics, tell us what makes a great race. And they said, you're asking the wrong question, because you need to ask what makes a competitive race and what makes an entertaining race. And they're different. We can leave it there till the next one.
That's good. Well, we'll do it again. William, John, Travis, Elton, Christopher, I appreciate you guys coming down. I think it's super fitting we did it here in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Like I said, it's the 75th anniversary of NASCAR. Nothing we talked about here hasn't been discussed at some point over the last 7 decades. And it's going to continue to be discussed both in the fans, but I think most importantly within the industry for decades to come. So I appreciate y'all's time.